Guys, last night I did post-fight review videos for Larez, Jack Ryder versus Armfield, John Ryder versus Jack Armfield, should I say. And one of the themes throughout those videos was my discussion about the Sky commentary last night. Subsequently today I've traded a few tweets, a few messages with various individuals out there. Some of them who agree with me, some of them who disagree with me. So I wanted to do another video today just to clarify exactly what I was referring to when I was being somewhat questioning and potentially critical of the Sky commentary. Now, the Sky commentary has long been criticised by boxing fans as biased, as one-sided, lacking in objectivity, and really it's been criticised for some time. And to be honest, I actually think that I've been rather even-handed with it. You won't really see extended videos from myself being critical of Sky, Eddie Hearn, the commentators, the broadcast team, etc. It's just not really been something that I've overly covered on this channel in the past. But I genuinely believe last night was a new low. And last night was the worst and most biased and most inaccurate commentary that I've actually seen in since I've been watching boxing on Sky, which, as you guys will appreciate, is a fair length of time. I thought last night was terrible. I thought it really was a new low in terms of boxing commentary. And unfortunately, the international superstar Carl Froch is the person who's going to take the brunt of my frustration here. Let's start with Ryder versus Armfield. Now, for me, this was a close fight. But really, the main story of this fight was quite how poor Ryder actually was. Jack Armfield, we know what he brings to the table. He's a big guy, very rangy at middleweight, a very light puncher. Armfield's a guy who keeps the distance, throws a jab, tries to pepper from range, a bit of an amateur style if you like. John Ryder, he's the guy who we expected to have the higher upside. He's the guy who was the matchroom home fighter. He's the guy who was deemed to be the bigger puncher and the bigger talent. And for me, the main story of this fight was simply how poor John Ryder was in there and how basic the levels he was showing were. Now, if you were to sit and watch this fight just listening to Carl Froch's commentary, if you weren't actually reviewing the tape, if you just listened to Carl Froch's commentary, you would be under the impression that John Ryder put in a fantastic performance last night. But as hardcore boxing fans, we should be able to look at that tape and realise that Ryder's performance was very, very, very flawed. It was a really weak showing from him. Now, there's a lot of discussions about how to score rounds. And people will talk about all the different criteria, the different methodologies, the way they see rounds. But let me tell you, when you're commentating on a fight, and Carl Froch is more experienced commentating than me, but seemingly quite an easy thing to be considering is punches landing. And if you actually go back and watch this fight, John Ryder's did not land very many punches. Certainly not to the level that Carl Froch was talking about. John Ryder was eating a jab, eating a straight right from Armfield. Then what he'd do is put the pressure on, he'd work his way inside the pocket, and he would unleash 5 or 6 hooks that Carl Froch would say was, he'd make out that they were devastating blows to the body. If you actually look at the fight, all of those hooks typically are landing on Armfield's elbows. They're coming on his gloves. Ryder is not landing multiple shots on Armfield. And I think, having sat back and looked at the tweets going out today, people are saying Ryder was robbed. People are saying Ryder was hard done by, that Ryder deserved to win. This was a very close fight. This was no robbery. This was a fight that could have gone either way. And I'm not surprised John Ryder lost this fight, because I think a lot of casual boxing fans who were watching the fight and who were listening to Froch's commentary would be forgiven for thinking that this was a one-sided performance, because Ryder was doing some of the more obvious things. He was the more come-forward guy. He was perhaps the guy with the higher output. He was perhaps the guy throwing the more power punches. But all of that is actually irrelevant in terms of winning a round. What's relevant in winning a round is more things like punches landed, damage caused. And for me, Ryder was causing very little, if any, damage. I thought Armfield's defence was dealing with Ryder's game very, very nicely. And I also felt that the punches landed from Ryder, in terms of clean shots that were landing on the body, landing on the head, were minimal. I don't think that Ryder won 8 or 9 rounds here. I think Armfield was doing more than enough to pick up rounds on a regular basis, and I thought his work was actually a lot classier and a lot more technically sound. But Carl Froch for me was so up Ryder's arse. He really was. He was sitting there waxing lyrical about John Ryder and about, he's saying things like, the will seems to have gone from Armfield. Ryder's really showing his class in this round. And to me, it either struck me that Carl Froch was being blatantly biased, or, less likely, that he didn't have the understanding of how to score a boxing fight. Because I'm not saying that you're an idiot if you scored the fight to Ryder, but I do think you don't know how to score a fight if you had this 10-2 or 9-3 in favour of John Ryder. This was a very, very competitive fight, and I really think Carl Froch's commentary wasn't good. Now, Paulie Malignaggi was making very good points in favour of Jack Armfield. He was talking about the Armfield jab. He was talking about some of the punches landed. But whether it was because he was in the middle of a Carl Froch Adam Smith sandwich and he didn't want to upset the apple cart too much, but he seemed to make the points but not really ram them home. I think Paulie had it a draw going into the last round, so he, like I, had it a very close fight. But Malignaggi was sort of making points that were apt, but maybe he was just worried about the confidence that Froch was exhibiting and that Adam Smith was exhibiting. Maybe he didn't want to stand out as being too much of a maverick, but he didn't really ram home the points. But some of the analysis that Malignaggi was putting out, specifically about Armfield's measurement of distance, was really good. But the Anthony Crolla fight absolutely took the biscuit in terms of commentary. I mean, I've rewatched this fight. At no stage in this fight for me was Larez ever hurt. At no stage in this fight really was Larez on the verge of being stopped. It's ludicrous. You could perhaps say Crolla had a better period where he looked more energetic in the middle rounds and Larez had 1 or 2 quieter rounds. That would be fair analysis. But to listen to the Sky commentators, you would assume that Larez was all over the place and was on the verge of being stopped. For me, what's in this fight, at no stage was Larez ever in trouble. At no stage was Larez ever hurt. And Larez was always having this fight the way he wanted it. There were some rounds where he became lower volume. There were some rounds he stood off and didn't throw his trademark fast hand flurry combinations. But for me, that was just because that's how he wanted to take the fight. And he established a comfortable lead and was happy to cruise the middle rounds at times to make sure that he had some gas left in the tank at the end of the fight. But listening to this commentary from Froch and Adam Smith, you would honestly be under the assumption that Larez was hanging on for dear life. It really was a bizarre set of comments. And then they went to Twitter and they found people who were tweeting out that Crolla was ahead. I mean, on my Twitter, I don't have the biggest Twitter. I think I've got 650 people I follow, all of whom are boxing fans or some way related to boxing. And I was looking at it between rounds, and everyone on I don't think I saw a single person saying Crolla was ahead. Yet Sky was saying, oh, Twitter's split. A lot of people on social media are picking Crolla to win this. And it was interesting because I had a friend around to watch the boxing last night, and the friend wasn't a hardcore, more of a casual boxing fan. And I was saying to him, I've got Larez 5-0 up here, or I've got Larez, ahead by 6-7 rounds. Well, how are you seeing it? And you could kind of see that the casual fan is more swayed by having a world champion like Carl Froch spouting some nonsense about how the fight is going. And for me, it was really, really dubious. And I'm really glad that the scorecard came back how it did in the Armfield fight. Hopefully that will teach Carl Froch not to be so ridiculous in terms of his commentary, because it's going to make him look silly when a scorecard comes out like that. It was actually a bit comedic that the scorecard was as wide as it was. I think one judge had it 118-110, which you'd almost have thought Ryder would have won the fight by that margin given the way Froch was commentating on it. So all in all, it was a really, really poor showing from the Sky commentary team. And I'm not someone who's lambasted them too much in the past and who's come out looking to be critical and looking to get a cheap win and a cheap laugh by criticising the Sky team. But yeah, it was really, really, really shoddy stuff last night. I was really surprised how poor it was, and I do think it's unfair. I do think it's unfair that Jack Armfield, who should be celebrating, and I'm sure is celebrating the biggest win of his career, is rewatching the fight and hearing Carl Froch talk over the fight, hearing about how Ryder was hammering him. It was nonsensical commentary. It was very, very poor stuff. Paulie Malignaggi stood out like a sore thumb last night. The points he was making were absolutely superb. I mean, he is known as a top quality boxing analyst, and Carl Froch was well out of his depth last night. He just seemed to lack. He was either being so biased or he lacked fundamental understanding of how to score a boxing fight. And that's not something I say lightly given his experience in the ring. But I was very, very, very disappointed by it. And I think that it's really created some misconceptions with the public. Even obviously my YouTube channel is a very small channel. But we get enough views that you can kind of measure a little bit of public opinion, and a lot of people seem to be buying into this hype that this was in any way a competitive fight between Crawler and Larez, and it just wasn't. I'm sorry, if you watch that fight back, I know that boxing's a subjective sport. I'll look at it and see it as 10-2, you'll look at it and see it as 8-4. I get that. There's always a bit of a swing, but the suggestion that this was in any way a coin toss at the end, the suggestion that Crawler was just close to nicking this one is ludicrous. This was a schooling at times in there. This was a real chasm in terms of the class on show. And I think the Sky commentary team have a lot to be responsible for. Thankfully, whilst the Sky commentary team were biased as hell, there was no home judging last night. We didn't see Armfield getting robbed. We didn't see Larez getting robbed or a dodgy draw. The judges were on point. I actually think that the Armfield score was a bit wide, especially the 118-110. And I actually did think that the Crawler and Larez scoring was closer than it should have been. I felt it was a wider win than what the judges had it. But nevertheless, the judges didn't seem to be on the same same wavelength as Mr. Froch, which is certainly a positive thing. Let me know your thoughts on this, guys. Am I overreacting? Was this a new low? I think it was a new low last night. What did you make of Paulie Malignaggi? What did you make of Carl Froch? Let me know your take on it. If you've enjoyed this, take the time to hit the thumbs up button. Please, if you're new to the channel, do hit subscribe so you can check out my other stuff. Many thanks for